Welcome back to a Note to the Runners extended edition. The goal of this micro podcast is to give you an insight into the inspiration, the motivation, and the stories that are behind the 42 poems in my anthology. This book releases on October 4th, 2024. I'm going to be having an exhibition in Melbourne, Fitzroy. You can get a copy of my book live and sign there. Otherwise, I would really suggest that you pre-order. And you can do that through my website, anotetotherunners.com. Drop your email, subscribe, and you'll get all the updates about the book and some other goodies along the way. Anyway, we're up to day 5. I am releasing one of these videos every day through till the book launch. So you're going to I'm going to pretty much read you the book and give you the backstory. Anyway, today's poem is called You're Not As Fit As You Hoped. You're not as fit as you hoped. Most of the time, you won't be. You're not the person you wanted to be. Most of the time, you try to be. Peak performance is a fickle and delicate place to be. You must exist below the peak and settle in. That is where you build your home. When the clouds appear and you get your golden moment, cherish it. Everything you hope for doesn't come around too often. Now, I wrote this one in Melbourne upon returning from Portugal and one of my big races or race attempts this year. I went to race Madeira Island Ultra Trail, which I'm sure you'll hear more about as I drew a lot of inspiration in the lead up to this race and post-race. Coming into the race, I had a little bit of a niggle, I got sick, and I think also with just the ebbs and flows of work, I just wasn't as fit as I hoped to be or wanted to be for such a big race. And I put so much into it, but there will always be times in our life where we're never as prepared as what we want. And this poem kind of speaks to that, is to be as fit and prepared and in the place that you want to be, it doesn't happen that often. Life doesn't allow it, whether you get sick, whether job opportunities come up, someone else in your life gets sick and you have to look after them, whatever it may be. It's like to string together the quote-unquote perfect training block is a very rare thing to do. And that often leads us in a place of we're not as fit as we hoped. So that's kind of the backing story. And then when the clouds disappear and you get your golden moment, I think for me, the inspiration behind those lines is I love hiking. I go on a lot of sunrise missions or even sunset missions. And particularly when you're going for a sunrise mission in the mountains and you want to get to this point at the sunrise and you're hiking in the dark, you're going and going and going and going, and then in an ideal world, the clouds clear, the sky's full of colour, golden light, but that also doesn't happen very often. And that was kind of the image that I wanted to build out in this poem. And I liken that to a race. For me, like a race going well, being super fit, you nail your nutrition, you don't blow up, you don't hit a wall. That's kind of like just getting an incredible sunrise on top of a mountain. And that's one thing I love. I also love the feeling of a race going well, but it doesn't happen that often. And I just, in the weeks after Madeira and even up until this point today, it's like I'm not as fit as I want to be. I'm not as fit as I hope to be. And most of the time I won't be, because when you do hit that point of peak fitness, it's a peak for a reason. And if you look at the shape of a mountain, it's like there's very little room up the top. And it's the same in life. You exist at peak fitness for a very little time. So you have to be okay to exist just below the peak. You can't operate every day at peak fitness. It's not a thing. So you have to be able to settle into being not your best day in, day out, and that is okay. But if you can time it right, great. And then most of the time, so you're not the person you wanted to be. Most of the time you try to be. And this one's more broadly speaking on life. I think a lot of us, somewhere inside of us, have a picture of the person that we would like to be, whether that's a kinder person, a happier person, more polite. For me, maybe that's more articulate in conversation or funnier. But you have, again, we have this idea of who we want to be, but we're not that. And it's okay. And it just takes time to become that person, in the same way it takes time to become the athlete that we want to be. So if we can exist just below our peak, but really do a lot of good foundational, nourishing work there, I think that is the best part. And that's where we spend most of our life. We don't ever spend our life at the pinnacle or in these peak moments. Life exists just below. And a lot of life exists in the clouds and in the grey. And I think the better you can be at finding joy and wins and victories and self-worth in the grey, in the clouds, or just below the peak, that's a really, really, I think that's the goal. I really think that's the goal for being a sustainable athlete, being a happy and fulfilled human. So, yeah, everything you hope for doesn't come around too often. I think that final line is very self-explanatory. But when you do get the things that you hope for, they'll be worth it because you've developed this patience for it. And for me, again, it's like one day I will go back and race Madeira, the 115, and I'll do the due diligence and the time in the mountains and the strength work, and I'll have my body and my mind in the right place. And when that moment comes, I'm sure it will be far greater than if I achieved that this year. It would have meant the world for me to achieve it this year, but after the failure and how this year went, I think it'll mean even more to go back. So that could be a whole nother podcast in itself, just what failure teaches us. But that was the backing behind this. Now, I would absolutely love it if you could drop your email on anotetotherunners.com, if you could pre-order, because it takes me a long time to handwrite letters, particularly if they're going overseas. So I'd love your email. I'd love for you to pre-order, and I'll see you again for day 6. Or I'll see you tomorrow. Anyway, I hope you've had a great day. Ciao.